My guest for the next 25 minutes is at-large candidate for at-large City Council, Matt Van Heineken. Welcome, Matt. So you are no stranger to the City Council. You've served before. So before, let me just remind our listeners of what the format is here. So each candidate, Ken Stomsky and I have been interviewing all the candidates that wanted to be interviewed on air. We're asking you all the same questions, not necessarily in the same order, but they are all the same questions. So no one is getting, a different question than anybody else got. Same time limit, so we'll have about 25 minutes. And I like to start, and I think Kenny does as well, with just before we get into the formality of the questions, Matt, just tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What do you do?
Sure.
That kind of thing. Okay, and just bring that mic a little closer.
There we go.
There you go. Now I can hear you.
So I'm a Westfield native. I've lived in the city for 33 years. Spent the first 18 years of my life here, and the last 15. I grew up on the Paper Mill Road area.
Okay.
And my wife, Melissa Gravel, now Van Heineken, obviously, she grew up on the other side of town. But we met years later, and we have 3 boys, ages 11, 9, and 6. I moved away for a dozen years and moved back.
Yeah.
So it's a similar theme to another candidate I'm thinking of. But I grew up here.
Now, where did you go to school when you were in Westfield?
Yeah, I'm a student of the public schools.
Yeah.
Graduated Westfield High School.
Okay.
Moved away for a dozen years. Basically, I have a 20-year career in professional nonprofit fundraising.
Okay.
I lived initially after graduating college, I went to Providence College.
Okay.
Moved to Boston for a few years. I was an admissions counselor with Wentworth
No
Institute of
kidding.
Technology.
Oh, I did not know that.
And then moved, so that was my first foray into higher education, and then moved to Washington, D.C., where I ultimately landed in my initial fundraising job with the Nature Conservancy.
Okay.
So I started at the global headquarters in Arlington, Virginia.
No kidding.
And then migrated down to their Virginia chapter in Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
And then 9/11 happened, and there were some other issues going on medically in my family that sort of had me reassess where I wanted to be in my life.
Yep.
Moved back north to stay with the Conservancy and to the Adirondacks chapter, and then within a month met Melissa, which drew me back to Westfield.
So you didn't know Melissa in high school at all?
Actually, no, we did.
You did. You just kind of reconnected.
Yeah, we
there?
were friendly to each other, never dated.
Yep.
So reconnected years later. And,
funny how that works, Matt.
Exactly. So So within a year of moved back to Westfield, landed the job at Westfield State, and so essentially ever since have been now 20 years in higher education fundraising.
Okay. And you just recently started a new job, is that right?
That's correct.
Where are you now?
I'm Director of Development and Sponsored Programs with 5 Colleges, Inc. in Amherst.
Yep.
So it's the consortium of the 5 colleges.
Yes, the biggies up there.
Yeah.
So now where's your office based, though? I always wonder with the 5 college consortium. Are you at one of the colleges?
Technically on the Amherst College campus.
Okay.
Right in downtown Amherst.
Okay.
So yeah.
Fun, and that's going well so far.
Yeah, it is. It's a whirlwind. I'm about 5 weeks in.
Well, and you started right at the beginning of the semester, which
Exactly.
is always which is always interesting.
Yeah.
Having done the college thing myself,
exactly.
That's a little interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so let's start with your first question, Matt, which is, as I mentioned before, you had served on the city council before.
Mm-hmm.
So why do you? You've already done this, Matt. Why do you want to do it again now? Why would you like to serve on the city council? What's your motivation here?
Well, first of all, I enjoy it.
Okay.
I'm not doing it for
Yay.
any other reason than I do enjoy it. I wasn't put up to it. Wasn't pressured into it.
It wasn't a dare.
No, not a dare. Not out of anger over a particular issue. Just enjoy the work.
Okay.
And serving the city. And really, you'll hear all the candidates say they love Westfield, but I really, I've always had an interest in government. And politics. I was a minor in political science as an undergraduate.
Okay.
Later earned my master's in public administration at Westfield State with a focus in community development management and planning. So I bring 11 years of public administration experience. I served on the planning board, you may recall, for 7 years before serving on the council.
I forgot that you had served on the planning board.
Yeah, so
I'm
really
glad you
gained a
mentioned
lot
that
of,
because I had actually forgotten that before you were on council.
Gained a lot of skills there in terms of listening to the public, understanding the process that's involved.
Yes.
With an issue.
Yes.
Understanding the importance of listening to the public. listening to both sides of an issue, weighing it,
Right.
understanding your area of sort of, your jurisdiction, if you will, for lack of a better term.
Yes.
As a planning board
Right,
member, in
right,
terms
right.
of interpreting the zoning, what can or can't happen.
Yep.
So I really, I really enjoyed that. But I'm also a stakeholder too.
Okay.
In every sense of the word.
Okay.
From not just a resident, but a parent of 3 boys that I've already mentioned, who are all students in our public schools.
Yep. Now, are they all going to the same school, or are they in different
No,
schools?
I've got one at the intermediate. And
Okay.
two at Highland.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you're right. So you're actually a part of the
Yeah.
fabric of the community as well.
like literally like a stakeholder in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
I enjoy the work, and I really just want to, take my interests and my experience, my independent voice, which is something, you're seeing a theme you're seeing, I think, particularly this time around, is, the slate of candidates.
Yes.
Whereas I do see myself, and I've proven myself to be, more of an independent voice, not just going along with a majority of other like-minded counselors, but, taking my independent stance.
Yeah, so sort of going issue by issue as
Exactly.
opposed to.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next question, Matt, which is how do you increase commercial and industrial development in the city in order to reduce the residential tax burden when generally residents do not want kind of, quote, anything in my backyard?
Yeah. No.
How do you
that's-
respond to that?
I can appreciate the question. I think, especially with my planning board background,
Yes.
I think siting is critical. Yes, we have industrial zoned areas of town, but you have to think about the impact that has on residents. So I think first and foremost, if we can focus our efforts on attracting less intensive uses, industrial uses, light industrial uses for those parts of town, and also uses that don't generate as much truck traffic as has caused problems in more recent years. The
Matt,
impacts
can
that
you
those have.
just kind of expand on that a little bit?
Yeah.
When you say, what was
Light
the term?
industrial.
Yeah, light industrial.
Yeah,
so
less
can you
intensive.
kind of define that for our listeners
I mean,
and for me, because I don't
No,
really
understood.
exactly know what
yeah,
that means.
I mean, we have to remember that that part of town sits largely on the aquifer, so we have to consider the environmental impacts for the uses that wish to come in there.
Yep.
Now, there are cases where uses that come in are permitted, but may pose some compromise to the aquifer. And
Okay.
so, and the planning board, within reason, has some latitude,
Yeah.
In discerning that and sort of putting restrictions on uses.
Okay.
To some extent. But there could be a case where rezoning, maybe for even lighter uses that don't pose as much, like maybe, where less chemicals are used, for example,
Okay.
or less
All right.
threats. So I think siting is critical. I think it's great when you have representatives that come in front of the city who are mindful of these things when they're representing their clients in front of the planning board.
Yes.
I do think incentives are important as well, the TIFs that we often hear about.
Yeah.
Perhaps on a more limited basis. I think, everyone talks about the downtown. I do think the downtown can be, there could be more incentives there to locate, more retail-oriented businesses there. But I think one of the key themes I see is that we really need to professionalize the council, bring professionalism back a bit. I've seen a lot of really unprofessional behavior
Yeah.
from some of our counselors, and it's frankly kind of embarrassing now as a private citizen
Yes.
to sit and see that these are our elected officials, our representatives on the council, and that's the face that we're giving to prospective businesses that wish to come here. Not to mention the hoops that they have to go through. I think if we streamline to some extent, not give them a free pass,
Right,
but I
right,
think
right. Yeah.
streamline. There's a lot of boards and commissions that have to be, hoops that have to be jumped through.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if we do it in a more friendly way, where they still have to, cross all the I's and
Yep.
and so on.
Cross
and
the
so forth.
T's and
But-
dot the I's.
Right,
but,
exactly. But do it in a way
Yeah.
that's more streamlined.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So-
Good enough. Thank you. Okay. Next question for Matt Van Heineken, a candidate for at-large city councilor. What is your position on charter schools coming into the city, particularly in the Route Road area?
I do. I am a proponent of, in general, of choice when it comes to your children's education. And I think in certain communities where public schools and the public education system is overly challenged, then I would support it. I don't feel that that's the case in Westfield. I think we have a great system here. And I think folks need to realize that with the root road example is there could be serious ramifications, financially speaking, for our school department, both not just in loss of cost per student that we lose,
Okay.
but also the city's on the hook for transporting those students. So we're paying transportation costs as well.
Okay.
So you could have a sort of a double-pronged financial impact that could really hit us hard.
Okay.
And the schools are challenged enough. I'm a big supporter of the schools in general, and having to in particular educate our special education students, our obligations to educate those students and the costs involved. I think we have to be aware of the real impacts that a charter school could have in Westfield. In other communities, I think they do work.
Okay.
So
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Next question. How do you increase money available for infrastructure, yet keep the schools, police, and fire departments properly funded without overtaxing the residents?
yeah, I mean, somewhat touches on some of the same themes from earlier question.
Earlier question. Yes.
I think we had some successes when I was last on the council. I served when I was a counselor. I served my first 2 years. I was on the Legislative and Ordinance Committee. So that was a great window
Yeah.
into a lot of key decisions made by the council. And then the last 2 years I spent on the Finance Committee, and that was I
Another
embraced
big one.
Yeah, but I embraced both of those opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't after a year come off because it was too much work, or because my agenda couldn't be done. I think it was a great insight into what you can do in terms of we did a lot in terms of with Councilor Paul in particular, where bonding
Yes.
was looked at and
Yes.
utilized, and especially with the a lot of the sewer work that we've seen being done
Yep.
over the past couple of years, and integrating road work with that, and so seeing a lot. And there's been a lot of progress over the past few years. I want to see it continue, where it relates to specifically where it relates to roads.
Okay.
I've talked to many people who have said that, look, if my taxes are going to go up, I want to see an equal value in improvements across the city. And people have said to me that they've seen improvements in the roads. Some people have said who drive, for their jobs, they drive around
Yes.
our city quite a bit.
Yes.
And they've noticed that. So I just want to see that continue and
Okay.
make sure that it's done across the city in a fair way across all wards.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right. So you mentioned before schools and kind of your stance on that. So what issues do you have, Matt, if any, to making cuts to the school budget?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's funny because I've watched some of the other candidates speak to this, and sort of the way the question is framed suggests that, in general, I've proven myself to be a strong supporter of the schools, and I don't support any cut for the sake of a cut. And I think in the past, there's been efforts by counselors to just make across the board cuts without any thought or strategy or discussion with those departments to understand the real impacts. So no, in general, I don't support cuts to the schools. I think that's a key element to a strong community that makes you attractive. Both, even if you don't have children or grandchildren in the system, it behooves all of us to have a strong school system that can help retain the value for home, for its resale value, and it keeps us to be a competitive and attractive community for people to want to live here, as opposed to moving to other communities who perhaps may fund their school systems more than we do. So I'm not, and I touched upon this a few minutes ago, but the real obligations we have, costly obligations we have to educate, particularly in the area of SPED, special education, hundreds of thousands of dollars per year in some cases that we're obligated to do. And if you put yourself in the shoes of a parent of a special ed or special needs student, that student, we are obligated to educate that student like every other. And so continue to seek grants to offset those costs. Obviously, the state formula is being looked at to adjust.
Yep.
How Chapter 70 funds come back to cities for education funding, but I've proven myself to be a strong proponent of the schools for all those reasons.
Okay, good enough. Thank you. Next question: do we have excess spending? And if you believe that we do, how do you begin to control it?
I mean, I think in general, there's been a lot of belt tightening over the past several years, past few years anyway, across the board. And I saw that on the finance committee, analyzing the budget closely, speaking with department heads, getting a pretty good understanding of how much they've reduced their budgets, the shoestring budgets that many of them are on. Short staff. I mean, sometimes you can cut off your nose to spite your face, in some instances where you cut too much and you can't even perform the services that residents expect. So, it's a balance. I think efficiencies have to be looked at, and you hear that a lot, but I think it's true, and I think you can always look at ways to, combine needs across departments. There's been some talk of a strategic plan for the city, and I think that could go a long way towards identifying even more opportunities for efficiency, looking at efficiencies. But I think, like I said, cuts for the sake of cuts don't get us where we need to be. And if they're not targeted, if they're not thoughtful, they hurt us more than help us. And
yeah, I think it's interesting because I think that you, as you've mentioned before, and I had actually forgotten when you were a counselor previously that you were on both L&O and then on finance, because those are two committees where you really get a unique perspective.
You do.
Especially finance, especially on the budget side of, seeing every department head or listening to every department head, go before the finance committee to explain their budget. That's essentially what the department heads have to do is explain their budget and, why they've requested this amount of money. So I think that that puts you in a unique position to kind of speak to that.
No, it does. And I think in doing that, there's a level of respect that you gain from department heads and city employees in general. And unfortunately, I see a lot of disrespect from our counselors towards city employees, whether they be teachers, other employees, and it's just the morale has taken a definitely downward trend from what I've sensed. I think, and a lot of it ties back to the way that some of our counselors, disrespect city employees, and they're the ones doing the work that our tax dollars are intended for. So.
Boots on the ground.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, that's what I say. All right, so I've saved this question for the end. We're actually going through this quickly, so we'll have some time to chat afterwards. But I've done the water question at the end.
Yeah.
Kenny kind of sandwiched it somewhere in the middle on his questions, but for all my counselors. So this is kind of a two-parter. So what is your stance on the public water supply? Do you favor the carbon filtration approach to water treatment, or do you want to see an alternate source of water used instead?
Oh, contrary to the water I just drank out of this bottle, I do drink Westfield water, and I have for the 33 years that I've lived here.
Okay.
And so, in that sense, I'm also a stakeholder. I have three children that have been consuming our water right along with us. My wife was obviously was pregnant with the three boys, drinking the water as well. I do support the city's decision to do what they did. I think you have to, but at the same time, I do agree that long-term ongoing monitoring has to occur with those filters to make sure that they are capturing what they're intended to capture. I think, but you can really, there's been a lot of, as your question presented, there's a lot of folks growing sentiment for looking at alternate water supplies, and I'm not a proponent of that. I think for a few reasons. I think that puts us in a really that has the potential to put us in a really difficult situation when you're relying upon another municipality's water supply, not just from a cost standpoint, but from an emergency standpoint. It just makes us vulnerable. I don't like that.
Yeah.
I did have an opportunity earlier this week actually to attend a workshop up at UMass. That was put on by some of the researchers that are involved, and it was on PFAS.
Okay.
So it was actually pretty helpful to hear firsthand. But I think the most telling thing about it was that even in the agenda that was presented and sent out to us ahead of time, laid out very clear the gaps that exist in the data. And while there is much progress being made and interesting findings being made and some compelling findings, there's still a lot of gaps. And I think costly alternatives need to be closely looked at. And I think, before we do anything, I mean, like many of us, I look at things from a cost standpoint,
Okay.
and I don't see that necessarily looking at an alternate water supply is necessarily the best choice. I think if we continue to monitor the supply that we have, the filters that are working currently, that's what I would.
So let me ask you this, Matt. Since you went to this workshop, did you come away from that? Was your takeaway? Was your mind changed in any way? I mean, did you get information because we've heard lots of people talking about
Sure.
that that
Yeah.
particular conference
Yeah.
workshop, whatever. So just what was your personal take
I
on
went-
it? Did you come away going, oh, I never thought of it that way, or
Yeah. No, I think, I'm fairly, like I've mentioned already, I'm fairly open-minded and independent. When I look at any issue, I go in sort of eyes wide open and hear both sides.
Okay.
I didn't go into that workshop with any preconceived notions.
Okay.
Other than I did find it, like I said, interesting that, they laid out very clearly the data gaps that exist, and that they are addressing.
Okay.
But that, there's still a wide array of gaps that do exist.
We don't know everything
Right,
to
exactly.
know
So-
about.
Yeah, so eyes wide open, there were some definitely interesting facts, better understanding that one would gain that I gained from having been there. Rep. Belis was there, others were there. But, it's we have to just continue to monitor the situation, and that's what I would advocate for.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That sounds good.
Yeah.
We have about 4 minutes, so that gives you some time to bring up anything that you would like to bring up.
Absolutely. No, I'm Matt Van Heinigen, and I really hope to have your vote, the vote of every Westfield resident in this election. I think there are some clear choices to be made. Like I've mentioned already, I'm a native of Westfield. I've lived in the city for 33 years. I'm a stakeholder in every sense of the word. I'm an independent voice. What I'm not is, my campaign was funded almost entirely on Westfield residents. My campaign was not bankrolled by, political action committees and political parties based in Eastern Mass. You'll not see slick flyers from me with indicias indicating beholden to anyone but the residents of Westfield. I've been an independent, fair voice, and I've proven myself on the council to be that. I'm doing this because I'm in this because I enjoy it, and for no other reason than to serve the residents of Westfield. And I hope to have everyone's vote.
What, you're not in it for the fame and the money and,
No.
and all that goes with that?
Yeah.
And I just want to remind our listeners as well that you have served. How many did you serve? One term or two terms?
2 terms.
2 terms on the city council previously.
Yep.
And both. No, were you on any other committee? You mentioned finance and legislative and ordinance. I know
did.
you guys are all on a
I
slew
chaired
of.
I chaired the government relations committee. The big issue there was the bid. That
Yes,
was-
at the time,
Yep, yep,
the business improvement district.
Yeah, and that was a
Yeah.
case where I heard
Interesting.
the concerns from both sides, weighed the issues,
Yes.
and did take the vote to disband the bid.
Yeah.
So.
That was a really an interesting time, and I think it kind of speaks to sort of your stance on being an independent thinker, because there were absolutely really good arguments on both sides of that.
Right.
There were issues and concerns on both sides of it. So I had forgotten. That seemed like so long ago,
Yeah.
Matt. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my God, the
But
bid. That was
I
a long
can't
time
stress
ago.
enough how important it is for people to vote, and you hear this from everybody. 2 years ago, I came up short by 30 votes. So
No kidding.
Like I've said, but that's a small house party. So if everyone gets out there
Yes.
and votes,
Yeah.
I think we can definitely see.
Well, we had the preliminary election. You've got the difference on the mayoral side.
Yeah.
It was 100 vote difference. That's nothing.
Right.
That's nothing. We have
Exactly.
8,000 residents or
Exactly.
8,000 seniors. We've got 42,000 residents in Westfield. So, all right, Matt Van Heinigen running for at-large city council. Matt, I will say to you what I've said to all of the people that I've interviewed. Best of luck. And we do, as Matt said, we do encourage people to get out and vote. Know where your polling station is. Less than 6 days from now. Yeah, November 5th. So thanks so much for coming in, Matt.
Absolutely. Thank
Alrighty.
you. Bye-bye.
Okay. And speaking of interviews, my candidate interview for the next 25 minutes will be Rudy Musterite. Rudy is running for at-large, city council at-large. So welcome.
Hi, Tina. How are you?
I'm doing well this morning. Thank you. So, Rudy, we're going to start with just a little bit about you, especially you, because you have not served on council before, so we don't really know you. So, talk to us a little bit about, where you're from, where did you grow up, where did you go to school, what do you do for a living?
Well,
Give us a little background here.
I grew up in Westfield.
Okay.
Attended Westfield schools. Graduated from Westfield High, Westfield State College at the time. Come from a working class background. My mother immigrated from Poland and Germany. She came here in 1949. She was 18 years old. Growing up, we just valued the dollar. Both parents worked.
Okay.
I guess, like I say, working class background. We both worked, and mother worked. I worked. My sisters. I worked at tobacco farm when I was a teenager, and beyond that, I worked at Stanley Park. That's kind of where I developed my love of plants, being able to, grow plants. And I said, hey, you can make a living doing this.
Okay.
So I eventually started my own business, Rudy's Greenhouse on St. Paul Street. It was very successful. I enjoyed the part of just serving the people, taking care of their concerns, their needs, selling my products and stuff. So it was very, very enjoyable, very rewarding to do that. What else? My family, I got married, my wife and my daughter, Marilyn. We live in Westfield. Marilyn attended Westfield schools, graduated, I believe, 10th in her class at Westfield High. Very smart girl. My wife also works in Westfield. We're working class families, basically. We care about Westfield. My wife and my daughter, they both encouraged me. I had some issues with Westfield and how it's being governed and run, and they both supported me in going forward to run for city council.
Okay, and that kind of brings us into our first question, which is, why do you want to run for city council? So maybe be a little bit more specific about some of your either your concerns or what your motivations.
Actually, the thing that probably was a catalyst was the road situation in Westfield this past spring. And it continues to be an issue. There's bad roads out there, the way they were managed or prioritized or whatever you want to call it. It didn't sit very well with me. I want to affect change on the council, positive change. Number one, in the last few years, I've seen a very contentious council. No matter what the issue is, there is friction, there's contention. I believe that I can bring a little bit of a new perspective on that, more civility, perhaps a more respect of each counselor. Each one has different ideas, of course, but you have to, you have your own principles and stuff. But I think you can still get your point across in a civil manner and respect the other person's ideas and what they're talking about. Number two, priorities in Westfield, like I just mentioned, the roads and stuff. Each department has to set their priorities in a equal and fair manner. There has to be a fairness about it, what they're doing. And if it's really needed, there's needs and wants in Westfield, and I think necessities come first for the safety of the residents and the fairness of it, too. And three, the quality of life. We are in the 21st century. I think the quality of life issue looms large in Westfield. We have to think of the environment, your air, your water, the land that we occupy, and I think that determines a lot of how we structure the way we have businesses move in. I'm all for small businesses. I ran a small business for a very long time, and it was successful. But we have to, I think, scrutinize a little bit clearer and more closely large businesses when they come in, because that's where the biggest imprint on your environmental natural resources would take place.
Okay, I'm going to pause. I'm going to have you
Okay.
pause there because you're starting to get into some of our questions. So let's get to some of those questions
Okay.
now that we have a better sense of why you would like to serve on the council.
Right.
So, how do you, because you brought up the business situation and issue, how do you increase commercial and industrial development in the city in order to reduce the residential tax burden when generally residents do not want kind of quote anything in their backyard?
Well, again, that points to the larger issue of big business. It's a balance that you have to adjust. Obviously, I've been going door to door, and the main number one reason people talk about is the taxes are too high. But yet, you have to fund city services, you have to fund money for infrastructure improvement, and so forth. So it's a balance. So you have to take into account what that business offers, and you have to draw that business in. You have to have a good workforce. You have to have it schooled. You have to have the people that are here that can do the work, and that bears on the schools. And that's another balancing act too. So workforce is key to have good people here that can take the jobs, do the jobs in Westfield. Beyond that, you develop a good workforce, schools, your priorities, your infrastructure, your roads. How does that business get their products here? You have to improve the roads. You have to make sure that traveling on them is good, not only for the people, but for the businesses that are here. Basically, that's it. I mean, you
Okay.
have to,
Okay, good enough.
just do what you can do to draw business here and make them feel that they have a place in Westfield. Because if you do raise too much property taxes, when businesses come in, they're not only looking for their business, maybe the workers they want to draw in that are here or maybe from out of state. The business, whoever owns it, they want to be here too. They want to see the schools, they want to see amenities, a number of shops around Westfield, the downtown area. We have rails to trails in downtown. I think that's a big draw for the quality of life issue here. Not much is usually in the recent days or whatever, months has been mentioned about that. I think rails to trails is a very nice asset to the city, and we should keep that here. And I think that's part of the draw, to draw people here. Small business for downtown, shops and whatever, and then the big businesses to have the quality of life issue also.
Okay. All right, let's switch it up a little bit because you mentioned schools. You've mentioned that a couple of times. So what's your position on charter schools coming into the city, particularly in the Route Road area?
Well, charter schools is a little bit of a, you might consider them a hybrid. They do take public funds, but they're run privately. I am for, straight out, right from the get-go, I am for public schools. I don't think anything can compare to them. It's really, charter school is really not a business. It's like I say, it's a hybrid. But public schools, in my estimation, they're number one. The Massachusetts education system has been number one over the last many, many years, number one. So I think we should continue with the public schools, supporting them any way we can. I'm actually for the teachers, the custodians, police and fire, anybody that's doing the actual work in the trenches. That's who I'm for. As far as the road area, there are some other concerns there, I believe, with the aquifer, with the water and stuff. I believe that could be a problem there. I don't begrudge anybody to open a charter school. Obviously, they wouldn't be around if there wasn't a need, so they can do what they want. But as far as taking away from public funds and schools, I am a supporter of public schools. I always was. I always am. I mean, you get the whole range. You have sports, you have all these clubs and everything, and they do. Charter schools do take away from some of the funding that would go to a public school. So it's sort of an anomaly. Charter schools, I think, are sort of an anomaly in that they are, like I say, a hybrid. They want it both ways, and yet there's no local oversight. They do have a board or a private board that would look over, but teachers can be hired and not be certified. I think that's a big problem right there. So I think if you're gonna stick with education and the education of our young people for the future, you have to have the best possible environment and the best possible teachers that you can to make that student more well-versed and more competitive in the 21st century. And that can only be done, in my estimation, with public schools.
Okay. All right. You mentioned police and fire, so let's get into that question. How do you increase money available for infrastructure, yet keep the schools, police, and fire departments properly funded without overtaxing the residents?
Well, infrastructure improvement, roads and sewers and stuff, we do get funds. I mean, there's Chapter 70 funds, Chapter 90 funds, Chapter 70 I think is for schools. I usually get those mixed up. But anyways, there's state funding available for the roads, for infrastructure improvement, as well as our own property tax money that comes in. And all that money that you dish out for property tax and excise tax, that all goes into the general fund. And the city council or the mayor, they pick and choose where they want to put that money. Again, it's a balancing act. So you have to improve the way we prioritize stuff. And again, there should be fairness and equity in how we do that. For example, sewage development in the city for your infrastructure. I believe that's been kind of unequal. There are sections of the city which still are waiting for sewage expansion. There's a couple developments, Colony Drive, I believe Birch Bluff, no sewage development at all, yet across the way, new developments were built across the rails to trails, or we call it the dingle, back of Valley Drive. They got sewers right away. So, and they've had sewers in that area, septic tanks in that area, Colony and Birch Bluff, since the 70s. So that's not fair. I think prioritizing better, fairness better, and doing the projects will alleviate a lot of the problems and I would say, about the people of Westfield being mad, just plain mad that nothing's being done in their particular neighborhood.
Okay.
So.
All right. Okay, what issues do you have? We're going to go back to schools for a minute. So what issues do you have, if any, to making cuts to the school budget?
Well, cuts to school budget, you want to have the best education you can in Westfield with the amount of workforce that you have. If there are cuts to be made, and it's never been done, or usually is never even considered, it should be in management or administrative positions. Like I said before, I'm for the people that do the work. I'm a blue-collar guy. I started my business myself, and I'm a hands-on, outside guy, not an inside guy, not a pencil pusher, average person. And what I like is the people that do the actual work, the teachers, the police on the beat, the firemen that fight the fires, and the custodians. They know what to do. You don't have to ask them. You don't have to tell them. They know what to do. They do the work, and they should not be the ones that get cut if there are to be cuts. And it's normally them that get cut. And to me, that's wrong. I never was a fan of management, because all the managers can get together and they can even disagree amongst themselves. But if the people that are in there doing the work, they know what needs to be done. And if there were going to be cuts, again, I'd say administrative, the higher-ups, that's where the cuts would have to be, if any at all.
Okay. Do we have excess spending? And if you believe that we do, how do you begin to control that?
Well, excess spending, obviously I believe there's always excess spending, whatever department you have. And it's how you deal with money that is left over that you would use for excess spending. I think it bears on the department head of each department. And if I'm fortunate to get elected, I'll be meeting with every department head and finding out what their priorities are, what they are doing, what their plan is, how they're going to coordinate their services. And I'm going to ask him, if you have extra money left over, what are you going to do with that money? Okay? I don't like seeing jobs created just for the sake of creating jobs and giving that money for that position, just to use it up.
Well,
That's wrong.
here's a little lesson, department head lesson 101. If we have money left over
Right.
and we don't have something listed in our budget,
Right.
we are obligated to give that money back to the city.
Then give it back to the city, give it back to the taxpayers. Yes.
Well, it doesn't go back to the taxpayers.
Well-
It goes back to the city. Then it's up to the city council
Then the city
and the
council-
mayor to determine how that
Then
money
they can
gets
vote-
spent.
Then they can vote and give it back to the
Yeah.
taxpayers.
Well, I mean, just that's up to council, but just so
Right.
that you know, the department heads, we don't have the authority if we have excess spending,
Right.
excess
Right.
money.
Right.
And typically, at least, and I can only speak for my own department,
Right.
typically the excess, because I do give money back to
Right.
the city, is usually because we have to do our best guess as to, in my case, as to what our utility bills
Right,
are going to be.
right,
Now,
right.
sometimes that depends on how bad of a winter or not did we have. So maybe my gas and electric bill isn't going to be as high as we had budgeted for.
Right.
So that money's going to go back to the city. So, it's not, usually it's things like that where you're giving your best guess. Come time to the end of the year, and it's like, oh, okay, leftover, but that goes back to the city, and then it's up to the mayor and the city council, and
Well, if it goes back that far,
all that
then-
free cash.
Yeah, they
that's up to you then,
Yeah,
not your
well, then
department heads.
I wanted to go back to the people.
All right.
Should go back to the people out there.
Well, again, if you're on council, you'll have
Yeah,
you'll make that determination.
You have to vote me in, and I'll get that in for you.
Okay, so we saved the biggie for last. We have about 8 minutes left, Rudy. So what's your stance on the public water supply? Do you favor the carbon filtration approach to water treatment, or do you want to see an alternate source for water used instead?
Well, on the face of it, I want an alternate water source, clean source of water. The carbon filtration system, I can see why the mayor to allow it, and then it was passed. I believe $18 million bond was for expediency purposes, and also it does help. But there are a lot of unanswered questions on the water issue. I attended the PFAS conference in July, where the scientists were there and they were explaining what was going on, what's the all of it about the compounds and the PFAS and so forth. And it is, at the very least, very questionable, a lot of unanswered questions that they could not answer. There was a lot of people asking questions, and they couldn't give solid answers as to what these compounds do, if they cause cancer, if they cause other maladies, if anything else could happen. And what I understand, there's anywhere from 300 to 3,000 compounds. And I've also heard the amount of 5,000 compounds listed. As to what these carbon filters can take away or filter out, 6, 7, 8, maybe 13 compounds. And that's not even saying what can happen if there was a breakthrough of those compounds. I'm not a scientist, but I understand there's long chains or short chains or whatever. But the whole thing is there's a big question mark. About all they know, the scientists, is that the PFAS compounds attach to the proteins in your blood. That's supposed to be definite. Where it goes from there, how it affects the body, they don't know. So, with that being said, I would err on the side of caution concerning the health of the residents of Westfield drinking that water, even with the carbon filters. I would say that the carbon filters would be a temporary solution. I still feel we have to have a clean water source, whether it's a connection to the Thai Carmody, or in talking with a resident on Cabot Road, there's a Pond Brook aquifer, which is supposed to be separate from the aquifer on the north side, not affected by PFAS, drilling a well, maybe on that piece of property on Cabot Road that's vacant right now. I don't know what the city's doing with that, but they should either develop it or put a well there, do something with it, because it's just sitting there. So that is kind of my feeling on it. It's okay to have the carbon filters right now. I don't know if they're online yet, but I would consider it a temporary thing because there's a lot that we do not know about these PFAS compounds. And I am not going to subject the people of Westfield to, at the very least, water that is certainly not pure. And the residents on the north side, whether it's manufactured or they actually believe it, they are scared to drink the water. They do not drink the water. I've talked to a number of people. In fact, they're saying, why are we paying a water bill if we're not even drinking or using the water? They're buying in water, $150 to $200 a month, a lot of people, just to pay for water for the family. So whether it's the state, the federal government, that I know the federal government has offered some money retroactively a year or two. I don't know where that's going to, probably for the water projects. But the people, they seem to think, especially the ones on the north side, they want that money, or at the very least, they don't want to pay a water bill. They're getting charged double for water that's undrinkable on the north side. So that's kind of my feeling on it. I feel for the people on the north side. It's not an issue that that is nice, and it's not an issue that I would want them to see him in.
Okay. Rudy, you have 2 minutes, so why don't you can go wherever you would like to go with this and kind of, speak to our listeners with some final thoughts.
I had a prepared statement here, so these are my closings.
Sure, yep. Mm-hmm.
All right, I might as well just read this.
Sure.
I had a lot of my thoughts out previously. All right, I want to thank you, Tina, and Peter Cowles for having this radio interview. It's always nice to let the people in Westfield know who the candidates are, what we're about. That's kind of what I say door to door. I tell people I'm just out here trying to get my name out here, letting you know who I am, what I'm about, and so forth. So I thank you, Tina, again.
You're very welcome.
And Peter for having me here. I also want to thank my family, my wife, Debbie, my daughter, Marilyn. They were one of my biggest, are my biggest supporters, and they helped me very, very good, a lot in pursuing my run for city council. So I'm going to read a prepared statement, and here it goes. Westfield is at the crossroads of electing new people to the city council. Westfield needs to be sustainable, not only with its environment, but also with its city government. Look to those councilors who are dedicated, going door to door, meeting Westfield residents, and listening to their concerns. I have been doing just this, all summer since June. I've been meeting with people, discussing the important issues that matter to them, neighborhood issues that are sometimes not heard. There's a fellow on Holyoke Road, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, he gets woken up with big 40-ton trucks pounding the storm drains there. Why do storm drains have to be in a road? Why can't we offset them? There's people on Springdale Road waiting for 2 years to get a traffic light there at the intersection of Springdale and Union Street.
You have 1 minute, Rudy.
Okay. So these are issues that I'm concerned about. My business background has prepared me to enter the political arena with excellent people, managerial, marketing, and fiscal skills. I believe I can bring a fresh new perspective to the city and the council, as well as doing it in a respectful manner. I consider Westfield my home. I want Westfield to prosper and flourish in the 21st century. Residents must enjoy a good quality of life, and nothing less will do. This is my wish for Westfield. All I can ask of you is to please join me in making responsible change in government possible here in Westfield. So on Tuesday, November 5th, I respectfully ask for your vote of confidence in me and electing me as your next city councilor at large. Thank you, Westfield.
All right, very good. That is Rudy Musterite. He's running for at-large city council. Rudy, thank you so much. And as I've said to all the councilors, best of luck on Tuesday. Thanks for coming in. Good morning, Westfield. It is 7:36. You're listening to WSKB 89.5 FM, radio for the Westfield masses. My name is Tina Gorman. I'm your Wake Up Wednesday host. And we are broadcasting from Westfield Technical Academy. And behind the board, behind the glass, is producer Pete Coles. And with me for his interview, my final interview. This is our final interview for all of the candidates that Ken Stomsky and I have been doing. I have Dave Flaherty here. He is running. He's the incumbent and running for city council at large. So welcome, Dave.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting, and thank you for all you're doing here.
Oh my goodness,
it's really good. I know it's hard and tiring.
It's exhausting, but you know what? It's also energizing. It's always kind of it's an interesting time, and this is really an interesting election.
Yeah,
I think. People keep saying, "What do you think? What do you think?" I said, "I have no idea."
Yeah.
I really don't have any idea.
A good feel. I know there's an interesting mix of people, and
a lot of choices.
A lot of choices. And,
yep. But we appreciate you being here. So, Dave, let's start out with, especially for those listeners, you've been on the council for a while now, but for those listeners who don't know you, tell us a little bit about your background. So, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? What do you do for a living?
Sure. So I've been on the council for 10 years, for those who don't know.
Yeah, I know it's been a long time.
You'd be surprised how many people I run into in the community who don't know who the councilors are.
No,
and they
I
don't
believe
know
that.
how the council is set up. Like, they don't know the difference between at-large and a ward council.
Right.
They don't understand the structure of government.
Yeah.
A lot of people, if you ask them to draw an org chart, will put the mayor at the top, and then the city council, and then the boards and commissions and department heads.
Right.
And that's just not the way city government is set up.
It's not.
They just don't understand it all. So, so my background.
Well, we're here to explain that.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I've got a half hour. I'm not sure I can cover everything, but.
All right.
So my background, I didn't grow up in Westfield. That doesn't mean I'm not qualified to be.
No, I know.
I think we should have the best qualified people regardless of where they live. If we have to bring in people from Cleveland because they're the best person for the job, I think we should do it. But anyhow, I graduated Simsbury High School in 1980. I went to college at Boston Northeastern University with a degree in engineering and computer science. And I got a computer science degree, before there really was computer science.
Right.
While I was in school for electrical engineering, computer science as a degree program came along. So I was able to get a general engineering and computer science at the same time.
Okay.
Then I worked for Bay State Gas Company while I was in school. It's a great co-op program like they have here for the folk school. Northeastern is fantastic for that kind of
yes,
educational
they have a
experience.
reputation for that.
So I went out doing electrical engineering stuff for Bay State Gas Company and designed control systems that turned into eventually software control systems. Then I went to work for a company in Pennsylvania that they built 3 Mile Island. That's one of their
Really?
But
no kidding.
my area was water and gas control systems. And then eventually I came back to Bay State Gas, worked there for many years. I got a master's degree in business administration. I chased down a master's in computer science, but I eventually stopped doing that because I got married and started a business and all kinds of stuff. So I've got about halfway through another master's. I'm self-employed for about 25 years. I left Bay State Gas Company after about 15 years. Originally, I was building control systems as a consultant for Bay State Gas and people like them. And then the internet became more popular, and that was very much kind of what I was doing, for the gas companies and utility companies. It was all internet working, not what people see the internet as today. Right. There wasn't Firefox and those, the web was kind of new.
Yes.
But for me, it was not new. It was, we've been doing it for years.
Yep.
It's just a matter of making it available to the masses. So I started an internet company called Ashton Services, and we grew very quickly. I did a lot of contract work for the state, quickly grew it to over $1 million in consulting revenue, which is, really pretty good for labor.
Yep.
Some of my clients are the biggest government agencies you can imagine in Massachusetts, like the Massachusetts Registry of Motor Vehicles. I drive a car with a plate Webman. Yeah, you've seen that?
I have not.
They gave me the Webman plate because I built their websites and I did all their online transactions. So when you renew your driver's license, your registration and all that stuff, that was me personally, actually, in Boston doing that. And there was a Seinfeld episode with the license plate Ass Man. I don't know. Can I say
I
that
remember.
On the radio?
Oh, yeah.
So I can say that one? Okay. I guess if they can say it on TV, I can say it on the radio. So that became a kind of a joke around there, so they gave me one that said Webman for the office. A lot of people in the registry have license plates with their name or something on it.
Yep.
So it turned out the plate was available and I bought it.
Which is hard to believe that it was available.
But it
to
was
be honest
so
with you.
early on. In
Yeah,
the internet,
yeah.
You know?
People are like, what does that mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Even still,
Right,
I was
right,
out
yeah.
doing candy stuff the other day, and there's all these kids with Spider-Man, and I said,
Yeah.
well, hey, go look at my license because you'll think it's funny, So I did that, for a couple of years. I was in and out of Boston a couple of days a week working for them. Big Dig is my, one of my customers, Mass Turnpike Authority, Department of Public Health, 911, Environmental Affairs, lots and lots of places like that. Connecticut Economic Resource Council.
So, Dave, when and how did you settle in Westfield? That you kind of left that part out. So, how did
I married somebody from Westfield.
Okay,
So I graduated, went to Simsbury. While I was not married, I lived in Ludlow and Springfield.
Oh, okay.
Then met Liz, who is a longtime Westfield resident. Her family's here. She and all her brothers and sisters went to schools here. And when we decided to have kids and raise a family, this made sense for us. We were looking, and this is a very nice community. It's nice to be near the grandparents. So it worked out great.
Yeah, I
So,
was just curious
moved
about
back.
that. So,
So I still had a business in Springfield, and unfortunately, with the .com boom, I got swept up in that. I got killed almost by the WorldCom debacle. I don't know if you remember what happened with WorldCom.
I do remember.
But WorldCom took out all of the telecom companies, basically. There was very rapid growth in the telecom business. And WorldCom, they had a scandal, and it basically killed all the venture money for telecoms. And I just happened to have a bad partner at that time. It was a really good partner for me because I had a contract, a really big monthly contract to work for a telecom company to help their customers with internet things. And they ended up going bankrupt, and it almost bankrupted me. It took me years. I'm still paying off some of the debt that I have from 15 years ago. And I think that's another point I want to make is, I'm a typical small, medium business owner. I know all the issues of hiring and firing and contracts and, getting sued and suing people and trying to collect money and trying to pay all the bills that you have with taxes and rents and utilities. And so I have a lot of experience with that
kind of bring
stuff.
that perspective.
Yeah.
So let's get into the first question, Dave, which is which kind of dovetails right in from your background, which is why, and especially for you because you've been on the city council for a while. So why are you running this time around? What is it? What's your motivation?
Well, first I should tell everybody too that because the school committee loves me so much that the first time that I took papers out for school committee and city council. And I had been volunteering prior to this. I was on the board of directors of Big Brothers and Big Sisters. And then when my kids got involved and a little bit older in scouting, I couldn't do that anymore because I had too many time conflicts. So I wanted to serve the community here. And I looked at, well, how can I, where can I fit in? And obviously I was very interested in education. I have kids in there. My wife and I are both, very committed to education. We both have multiple degrees. Our family members all do. So I thought, well, education would be a great space. And thankfully, I think for the school committee, from their perspective, I chose city council because I'm kind of assertive and, aggressive when it comes to certain things. And so I chose city council. And part of the reason that I chose city council of all the other opportunities too was thankfully for Mark Crosati, because Mark Crosati tried to put a pumping station in my backyard for a SOAR thing like they have at Devon Manor. And the original design called for above ground pumping station surrounded by barbed wire fence in between $300,000 houses. So all the neighbors got together, and Rick Sullivan was mayor at the time, and we had we basically had to threaten the city. And eventually it turned out to be a nice resolution. One of the neighbors donated a chunk of land, and they built this very nice pumping station that looks like a guardhouse.
Okay.
And it's everything's contained, and it looks very, very nice. But as I was going through the process of that and then going to the council meetings, I was kind of frustrated with what I saw on there.
Okay,
and just the disconnect at the time, I thought, from what the city wanted to do and what the councils wanted to do and what the people of
what the
Westfield.
residents,
Right. So
Okay.
that flipped it for me. And then I would also, the school committee meets on Monday nights. And by the time it came for me to make a decision, I was committed to Boy Scouts on Monday nights, every Monday night for a long time. So I decided, okay, I had both papers signed. I was ready to go.
Okay.
I went with city council.
Okay.
So.
And so now you've been on the council for a
10 years,
while. And so what's the impetus for running again to stay on the council, Dave?
I think we still need change. I think, there are certain things that I think I can see in the city and in the finances particularly that other people don't see and don't understand completely and how it affects the big picture. So I think my role is to try to, have the vision of what is happening and what could be happening, and try to steer to avoid certain things bad things that we have coming financially, and also to balance what I consider just like the rubber stamping group of city councilors, because our job, as I talked earlier about the org chart isn't mayor, city council, boards, and commissions. It's mayor, city council, boards, and commissions. We are all equal when it comes to the power, and we have these checks and balances in our government for a reason. And the mayor proposes, the council approves, and sometimes the council write laws and the mayor approves. It's an equal system.
Okay.
And there are many councilors who don't believe that, who just want to, oh, the mayor wants it, let's go do it, without doing their own due diligence. The whole reason of having this balance of power is so that you have more heads looking at an issue, and you have a better outcome because you have more people actively involved in researching the issue. So that's why I'm staying involved. Originally, I was thinking I wouldn't be here for 10 years. I just, I never thought that.
I hear you.
So, but I'm here. I really like what I do. I think I make a big difference. I think, if you ask other councilors and ask department heads, they'll say that Flaherty does make a difference. Sometimes they don't always like the difference, but I think that, I have the passion and the ability to serve and do it well. And that's what I want to do.
Okay. All right. Let's get to your first question here.
All right.
So, how do you increase commercial and industrial development in the city in order to reduce the residential tax burden when generally residents don't want anything in their backyard?
Sure. Okay. So that's a perfect example of where my clarity will come in, because this presumption of the question is that you'll reduce residential tax burdens. And it's just absolutely wrong. There is no way to reduce the taxes. We owe so much money to employees like you and others and me. There's over $300 million that we owe you in net present value. That's not like what we owe you over a lifetime. That's today. We're supposed to have $300 million that we don't have. Okay, so there's no way to reduce the tax burden.
Okay.
The other thing is that the tax shift, we talked about, a lot of people are pushing economic development as a way to bring in more money. And in our case, it's not going to work. The math is not going to work. And I don't have time in the next 12 minutes to explain it. But for those of you who want to see this, go to my website or look up me on Facebook, because I have a longer explanation. But basically, for the last 11 years, 12 years, the percentage of the budget and the amount of money that's taxed on commercial development is very steady. And that's when we've had additions like Gulfstream and Home Depot and Pro Lamina and the doctor's office and the Walmart expansion and Rockies changing over. But if you look at the graph that I put up online and on my other tapes, you'll see that the amount of money that's brought in.
Point it that way. There you go. Nope, you're good. Right there.
I'm good?
Yep.
So the orange part on here is how much value is in commercial properties. It hasn't changed over the last 10 years, even though these big projects are in there. It's a fantasy to think that bringing in extra businesses is going to bring in extra new money. It just doesn't work that way. Mathematically, it doesn't work. So the foundation of the question is wrong. However, I do believe we need to bring in businesses. It's good for the community. It hires, there's people that get hired. It does, decrease vacancy. There is some additional revenue, but it's not going to be the savior that everybody thinks it is.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. What's your position on charter schools coming into the city, particularly in the Root Road area?
Okay. Another one, right? So we have mayor, city council, school committee. Schools are school committee, not city council. It's none of their business what I think about schools. We give them money at one time a year unless they need a bond. Other than that, schools are up to them. As a parent, I want my kids to go to the best schools possible. I think Westfields are adequate. I don't think they're rock stars, as some people imply. I think there's room for improvement. I think kids should have school choice. My older son went to St. Mary's when he was younger. I think St. Mary's offers a wonderful choice. I would love to see ability to have students in Westfield go there and use some tax money to pay for St. Mary's or other private schools if that's their choice. I think every kid should be given the best education possible for that kid, and the parents should be able to choose. The particular one you asked about on Root Road, I don't know anything about the background of it. I know it's a business venture by a very well-to-do person here who's trying to, help, grow his businesses and serve the community. But school issues are not city council business.
Okay. Fair enough. All right. How about this one? How do you increase money available for infrastructure, yet keep the schools, police, and fire departments properly funded without overtaxing the residents?
Okay, so three-part question again. Overtaxing the residents is a perspective, right? We are at the very close to what's called our levy ceiling, all right? And again, Pete, can you zoom on my little chart here? You'll see, and I'll put this up tonight.
There you go.
Yeah. So the top line is the maximum.
Okay.
The maximum
I got
tax
it.
that
The
we
red,
can do.
the red line.
It's called the levy ceiling. It's like your salary cap in professional sports. Those of you who are sports guys,
Yes.
it's the salary cap. All right.
Okay.
The blue line here is how much we're spending in the city, or how much we're taxing in the city.
Okay.
It's called the levy limit. You know,
Okay.
it's how much we have available for that particular year. As you can see, it's getting really close to that red line. That red line is not moving up significantly, right? For the last 10, 12 years, it's very flat.
Right.
We're getting really, really, really close. So as of June, we were like $4.5 million away. There's going to be some new assessments coming out. We might be $8 million away from hitting that cap. When we hit that cap, we can't tax anymore. Regardless of where you think the money's going to come from, we can't tax. We can't vote for overrides. We can't do anything. So the only saving thing for maybe the schools is that we can do what's called a debt exclusion above that levy ceiling, which would help pay for a new school. But you can't use it for operating expenses. The debt exclusions only apply for the particular purpose for a particular period of time. When we hit that, we're going to be like Holyoke and Springfield and several other, more industrial gateway communities, and we're going to be taxed out. So there's no easy solution to that.
Can I just want
Sure.
to ask you a question.
Yeah.
I've heard about the levy tax ever since you've been on the board.
Yeah.
So, or the levy, what is it called? The levy ceiling.
Right.
And you were saying that is stable. What would make that go up or down or stay stable?
Values. Yeah, so property values. So on this,
Okay.
that other chart that I showed you, this is the total of Westfield property values. And we're about $3.3 billion in property values,
Okay.
3.2 to 3.3 over the last 10, 12 years.
Okay.
It hasn't moved much. So
Okay.
even though, like I said, we add these big, huge warehouses in there, and Prolamina and Home Depot and stuff like that, as they add a little bit of value, other things depreciate. In the commercial space, they're allowed to depreciate. So
that's keeping that levy ceiling kind of.
and frankly, Western Mass is
static.
not as booming as other places in the country, right? So
Yeah.
it's very flat and steady.
Okay.
And that's what causes that ceiling to be flat.
Okay.
Now,
I was never
Yeah.
clear about what would make that go up or down.
yeah, well, it's essentially that's 2.5% of the property values. That's
Okay.
what the levy ceiling is. Prop
Okay.
2.5 makes it 2.5% of property values. So it's very flat. And these lines are not flat. The
Yes.
spending,
Yeah.
the green line, by the way, on the bottom is the one that the council. So the red line. Sorry, Pete.
Yep. There you go.
The red line is the ceiling.
Yes.
And that's a calculation, 2.5% of property values.
Okay.
The blue line is how much you can charge every year. And
Okay.
it's last year's number plus 2.5% plus new growth. New growth is the taxes available on new property development or expansions.
Okay.
Again, a basic calculation, city council can't do anything about that. The green line is the spend line. That's how much we choose to charge people in taxes. That is completely up to the mayor and the city council based on what we approve in the budget. And you can see the green line is tracked the blue line for a long time, particularly when Mayor Knappich was in. We came really close to the blue line. All right, a few years ago, Councilor Paul and I, we've been talking about this problem for a long time of the collision. So Councilor Paul and I kind of pressured everybody to do a zero tax increase one year. So several years ago, this time of year, we chose to burn some free cash in order to have a zero tax increase. And you can see that gave us the separation
Yeah.
in this chart
Yep.
here.
I got it.
Then the next
I'm
year,
with you.
The next year,
I mean, I'm following this.
okay, good. So then the next year, because of that gap space, the calculation required us to have a 6% tax increase in order to do everything that Mayor Sullivan wanted to do. And me and several other councilors and the public were furious about that. And we spent a lot of time advertising that 6%. I don't know if you remember my crazy squirrel pictures with 6% on it and all these. There was a lot of activity. And I think, frankly, that brought in a couple new councilors that we have now that we didn't have before. But that also moved us a little sideways in the chart here. So we've managed to maintain this gap space.
Okay.
That gap space has also avoided us hitting that levy ceiling. Because we have more breathing room now, the levy limit is going to hit first, and then a year or two later, the levy will hit.
Okay.
So, and also this gap space here, that's taxes you didn't pay because of action we took back here.
Okay.
So millions of dollars in taxes saved by doing this, and also it gave us more breathing room for the levy cap.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay. Let's see what the next one is.
Go quick.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to throw
I'm
this.
looking at
I'm
your
throwing them all out there. When we're beyond, we have a little bit.
Okay.
We have another couple minutes after 8 because I started late. What issues do you have, if any, to making cuts to the school budget?
I think every department in the city needs to work efficiently and manage their money well. I think the school department gets a lot of money. They get more money than other departments in the city on a regular basis. They have the largest block of employees. Their union generally is the pace setter for other unions. This year they decided to sit back waiting for the Janus decision and for other things to go on. But generally they're the lead role. I think if we have to take a cut in the city, everybody should take a cut somehow. I think everybody should be working towards excellence. I think everybody should be working toward customer service, and I think everybody should be working towards efficiency. I know at your place, you manage it extremely well. There's not a whole lot of fat there, right?
Yeah.
And there really isn't in anywhere in
Yeah.
the city. But I think everybody needs to have that mindset, like you and Captain McCabe is another one. He knows that budget inside and out. He knows where every bullet is spent. So we need all the departments to think that way, and we need them to understand their role in the city's obligations and debts and management. So the school department and school committee has to realize that when they make a small move of 1 or 2%, that's equivalent to your whole department.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And for the last several years, their budget keeps going up and up and up, and their enrollment is going down, down, down. They've closed schools, yet their budget keeps going up. They've laid off hundreds of people. Their budget keeps going up. So they need to find ways to do what they need to do without burdening the city and all the other departments in the city. So I'm not hesitant to make cuts. I don't want to tell them how to make the cuts.
Yes.
But I think every department in the city, especially the big ones, there's a lot more flexibility in there. They need to figure out how to best manage and best deliver the services that everybody expects. We can't micromanage them. It's not, we're not experts in schools any more than we are in water.
Yes.
But we have to be able to say to them, okay, you're going to get $62 million this year. You have to figure out how to run it.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that's
All right. Fair enough. So, and this kind of dovetails into that, Dave. Do we have excess spending? And if you believe that we do, how do you begin to control it? And I think you've kind of
I don't
answered
believe
that.
we have a lot of fat everywhere. I do believe there's some people in positions that are just given the positions because they have nowhere else to put the person, and then we're stuck with them, or they hire somebody and we're stuck with them for years. Certainly not big numbers. Like, there are some places like that. I think there's room for opportunities of combining some departments and sharing services with neighboring communities. But as far as waste and fat, there's not a whole lot.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the final question here, Dave. This one's my final one, and we still have about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay, good.
What is your stance on the public water supply? Do you favor the carbon filtration approach to water treatment, or do you want to see an alternate source for water used instead?
Okay.
Here we go.
So again, mayor, city council, water commission. Water commission runs the water department. City council cannot tell the water commission what to do with that water department. That's their job. We get to approve the money, and that's about it. So back when all this happened, they needed us to approve bonds. That's what
Right.
our role is.
Right.
So, and I'm drinking bottled water from somewhere in California, probably. But our role in that conversation is this a justifiable expense, and does it make sense for the city, right? We have to approve a bond for many millions of dollars. And the first time we voted on it, after hearing what I heard, I said, I was one of the no votes. I said, no, let's just hold on here. There's people that have questions, and they're legitimate questions on the council that need to be answered. And that's our role. Again, like I said, we have the power of deliberation, and we're equal branch of government. And we deserve the amount of time it takes us to do our job. And at the time, there were several councilors that I thought had really good questions that weren't being answered. And, I know that's uncomfortable sometimes for the department heads or the mayor to have to justify things, but that's what this whole checks and balances system of government is all about. So after the no vote, the people in the community thought, it's heroic. The council says no. The internal people are saying, what are you guys, stupid? We got to provide water to these people. How are we going to do it? You just killed us. So there was a lot of that tension going on. And the mayor, Mayor Sullivan, at the time, and John Beltrandi, and I met in the mayor's office. And, it was like, you're one of the more rational people on council, Dave. What can we do to move this along, And I said, well, we got to answer the questions. You can't stonewall people. You can't just refuse to answer a question because you don't like the guy or you think he's a. Can I say that 7-letter word?
No, be careful.
Okay, I can't say that 7-letter word. But there's this tension on council and in the mayor's office, and sometimes it just creates a very challenging working relationship. So, what we decided in that meeting was they agreed to answer the questions and give us whatever we want. And I said, Brian, you got to. Who cares? Just give them what they want.
Yeah.
That's part of their job.
Yes.
You don't take it personally. And I say that to Brian and Mayor Knappich too. This is not personal. This is us doing our jobs. Just because we ask you hard questions doesn't mean we don't like you or we don't want to be your buddy or we want to try to insult you. It's not that at all. It's that we need to do our jobs. So we had that meeting. Basically, we decided we would get all the information to everybody, set up a separate meeting. We brought in this board, and we sat all those experts in front of us in city council chambers. We fired every question we could. We had pages and pages of questions. And at the end of that, I came away saying, you know what, all these experts agree that GAC filtration is the way to go. Right now, for where we are in Westfield, that's the best solution, best across the country and the world. That's what people use. So I brought my little prop here.
Okay, you got about a minute.
Got a minute.
Yep, go
This
ahead.
is my prop. So this is my mini carbon filtration system
Okay.
that I use when I'm out backpacking, right?
Oh, okay.
So I do a lot of backpacking with the Scouts. We skipped over Scouts, but I do a lot of stuff in the national parks and other places in the middle of nowhere or in the middle of places that have pollution. This little filter is what we use to clean our water. And
Okay.
inside here is a set of membranes that act like a screen, and then there's carbon filtration on the inside. And you pump the water through it, and it comes out the other side drinkable. And I've had this thing in places you wouldn't believe, and the GAC filter does its job. You have this crappy-looking water that's dirty and chemically,
Yep.
on one
Yep.
side,
Yep.
out the other side comes nice clean water that you can drink and cook with. Great system. This particular version is like $70.
Okay.
People have this in their house. It works very well, so I'm very satisfied. As far as the debt, I am satisfied putting the debt to do the filters. As far as future, I believe that we should always look at future options. We just can't have all our eggs in one basket. This system was designed for the particular need for a particular period of time. There's no reason in the world that we can't look at other sources, that we can't look at long-term and backup. What if something, a major industrial accident happens over that aquifer,
Okay.
right? We got to be prepared.
All right, Dave. Thank
All
you.
right,
That was.
three.
You know what? You really gave me a run for my money because I'm a fast talker. But yeah, I know you, and I'm the same way. It's like
half hour's
I have
fine.
so yeah. I know it is 25 minutes.
Yeah.
But anyway, I appreciate you coming in. Dave Flaherty, running for at-large city council. We do have the at-large forum tonight here at Westfield Technical Academy upstairs in the auditorium. We encourage people to come. There's plenty of seating up there. Lots of room for people. We are broadcasting all of those, and the videos will be playing. I think Pete and Kenny will have all of those running like nonstop. If I'm looking at Pete, he has his headphones on, but
They're
not
going
the
in a
speaker.
loop
Yes.
all weekend. We're going to start it on Sunday and just go all the way through
Oh, yeah,
right
so
up
I'm
to
going to skip
election
the
day.
Patriots game to watch that.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so
Well,
you know what?
but
But
you know what? It's
you don't
gonna
even
run
have
in-
to though, because it's just going to keep running. So if you can see it all. You can
And all
see
the videos
game
will be
and
available on YouTube as well.
Great.
So
absolutely. So Dave,
at your convenience, Dave.
I want to thank you for coming in. I will
Thank you.
tell you the same thing I told everyone. Best of luck on
thank you
Tuesday.
very
And
much.
you know what? Thank you for your 10 years of
Oh,
service
thank
thus
you.
far.
And thank you for all you do for the seniors. People in town don't realize. How many seniors are there, by the way? Is it like
We have over 8,000.
8,000?
Yeah,
So,
over 8,000. One of the larger. We have, other than I think Chicopee has more than. I know Chicopee has more than we do, but I think
yeah.
that's it for
so
the
out of
Pioneer
40,000
Valley.
people, 8,000 are seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you count as seniors?
Growing, 60 and older.
60 and older. Okay.
Yeah. So right now, my youngest is 60. My oldest regular, who comes once a week for lunch, is 103.
103.
Yeah,
Wow.
and then everybody in between. So I like to remind people that that's a 40-year difference.
Right.
So if you were working with, a newborn and a 40-year-old, you know what I mean? They have
absolutely.
very, very different needs. So
Yeah.
very diverse
Absolutely.
population.
Yeah, and if you're in that senior group,
Anyway.
get down there and visit if you haven't. It's
So much
It's not
fun.
just old people playing shuffleboard.
No,
and
it
cards.
isn't.
Really
It
isn't.
isn't.
It's a very, very active,
Very
social
vibrant
center,
community.
and there's a lot of services provided.
Thank you.
So
Thanks,
thank you
Dave.
very much.